Commencer la réunion de FEDCO dans 1 minute. Merci. Good morning, colleagues, members of the public, members of the media. Welcome to the November 1st, 2022 meeting of the Finance and Economic Development Committee. Our last meeting is this council. Do we have quorum, Madam Coordinator?
Yes, you do, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Before we proceed, I'll do a quick call of all members. Conseiller Cloutier, Councillor Curry, Councillor DeRuse, Councillor El Shantiri,
Present.
Councillor Gower,
Here.
Councillor Hubley,
Here.
excuse me, Councillor Luloff,
Present.
see him there, Councillor Moffat, Councillor Tierney,
Present.
and Vice Chair Dudas.
Ici.
Declaration of interest, déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. None. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de process verbal, FEDCO minutes 41 of June 28th, 2022. Process verbal 41 de CFDE le 28 juin 2022. Adopté, carried.
Adopté.
Presentations, the LRT quarter update will be moved to when we deal with all LRT items at item number 10. So we'll come back to that. Finance Services, Direction Générale des Services des Finances. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions, commentaires?
Questions or comment? Adopté.
Innovative Client Services Department, Direction Générale des Services pour la clientèle, Legal Services Report that FEDCO received this report for information. Received?
Received.
Item 6.2, 2022 mid-year procurement year in review that FEDCO received this report. Carried?
Carried.
Bureau du greffier municipal, rapport de fin du mandat 2018-2022, comité.
City Clerk's Office. Advisory Committee on French Language Services. Carried.
State and Economic Development Department, delegation of authority, delegation of authority, acquisition of land and property, January 1st, 2022. To June 30th, 2022, that FEDCO received this report. Received? Item 8.2, land exchange of 529 Tremblay Road and 530 Tremblay Road with, for the first time, His Majesty the King in right of Canada. Councillor Cloutier, I believe, has a motion, and Councillor Fleury, this is really Councillor Fleury's motion, as I understand it. And Councillor Fleury is with us now and not able to be with us a little later. So we'll ask Councillor Cloutier to introduce it on behalf of Councillor Fleury, and then ask if there's lots of questions, we'll come back to it. Otherwise, we'll deal with it now. Councillor Cloutier.
Very well. Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Thank you very much. And indeed, this is a motion with respect to the property at 529 Tremblay Road, and where there's a plan of subdivision that will have a site plan later, but we wanted to introduce this motion with respect to affordable housing, and I'm doing so on behalf of Councillor Fleury. We circulated the motion this morning with the whereases. I don't think it is necessary for me to read those, but I will absolutely read the therefore be it resolved that the Finance and Economic Development Committee recommend that Council direct staff to negotiate towards negotiate towards an amendment to the memorandum of agreement to include a commitment from Canada Lands Corporation, should they acquire the surplus lands, for the provision that 20% of the units developed on the site are affordable housing as defined through any program under the Federal National Housing Strategy for a minimum of 25 years, including that for affordable units, a maximum of 50% shall be one-bedroom units, a minimum of 20% shall be two-bedroom units, and a maximum of 25% shall be bachelor units, and a minimum of 5 percent 3 or more bedrooms. I am agreeable to the motion, and Councillor Fleury is with us to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So Councillor Fleury, with the will of committee, would you like to speak to this? Because I know you're not able to be here. I think you have an appointment later today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Peter Radke as well as the local councillor Jean for working with me. It's the complexities of federal lands being transferred between federal agencies. So we want to make sure that the value that the land is appraised reflects the intentions of the affordable unit. So we work closely with Canada Lands Corporation, Tara and her team, to draft the wording of the motion. And I believe Peter Radke from real estate, as well as Tara, are comfortable with the from CLC, are comfortable with the wording presented today.
And is staff supportive of this? Who from staff is here that can comment?
Mr. Mayor, Peter Radke from the real estate office, and yes, we're comfortable with the direction being provided.
Okay, so on the motion by Councillor Cloutier, carried.
Carried.
On the
Carried.
report as amended,
Carried.
carried. Okay, thank you. Item 9, City Manager's Office update on light rail transit. That'll go with item 10, so we'll hold that. Then we have one in-camera item that we'll have to move to add it to the agenda. And I believe there is one other item where we had a delegation, if I'm not mistaken, Carol. So item 12 has a delegation, so we'll deal with that first. Motion 12.1, waive the disposal of real property policy to transfer lands to Tartan Homes. We have a delegation by Peter Hume, who I understand doesn't have to speak if it's passed. And I have a motion by Councillor Gower. Councillor Gower, would you like to introduce your motion, please?
Yes, thank you. So therefore be it resolved that the Finance and Economic Development Committee replace the wording in recommendation 2 of item 12.1 of the revised FEDCO agenda titled Motion Waive the Disposal of Real Property Policy to Transfer Lands to Tartan Homes Limited as follows. Council to waive the disposal of real property policy to enable the city to transfer a portion of the hydro corridor to accommodate either a public or private road back to Davidson Shea Properties Incorporated for a nominal charge. And this motion just corrects and clarifies the actual owner of the property in question that the original motion dealt with, Mr. Mayor. And overall, the motion is meant to correct an error. There was a small block in lands that was conveyed to the city that was not intended to be conveyed. So this motion just seeks to correct that error that was made.
Okay, now to our delegates, Mr. Hume and Ms. Cote, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't see Ms. Cote, Mr. Mayor, but no, the councillor has outlined the situation appropriately.
Right, thank you. So on the motion by Councillor Gower, carried. On the report as amended, carried. All right. We have. Okay, so we'll go back now to item 4. We have item 4 and item 10, and I'll call it 10A, all dealing with light rail, and we have a presentation. We have Renee Amakar and Michael Morgan. I think they're here virtually with us, if I'm not mistaken. Welcome, bonjour Renee. And Michael, is Michael here? There he is. Okay, so Mr. Kanellakis, do you have any opening comments you'd like to make?
No, I don't, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so the floor is yours, Renee and Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Michael will walk through the presentation.
Very good. I think we have a video to start, so we'll start with the video if the clerks could bring that up.
So your mic is a little off there, Michael. Are you using a regular mic?
I can switch. I'll switch while the video starts.
Yeah, it seems quite echoey. So I think your video is running now.
So as you can see from the video, lots of progress on the two lines there. I'll just we'll bring up the presentation here just to give you basically a blow-by-blow update on the construction in the various parts of the city. So while that's going, I would just note in that video we showed that one little section of the cut and cover tunnel. That was actually the first section of the cover being covered over. So we're topping out the tunnel in many sections in the SGM Parkway, and so we've actually covered about 200 meters out of the 2.8 kilometers that we need to do. So still lots more tunnel to build, but we are making progress. So we'll go right into the second slide, which is just a reminder of all the things that stage 2 is bringing 77% of Ottawa residents within 5 kilometers of light rail, creating 1,000 full-time jobs. The system being capable of carrying up to 24,000 customers per hour per direction during peaks during the ultimate build out, replacing more than 900,000 annual rush hour bus trips, and reducing up to 110,000 tons of GHGs by the year 2048. So lots of changes, lots of benefits coming with the project. We focus a lot on the construction progress. So if you go to the next slide, just show you, just as a reminder of the renderings, which are available on the Stage 2 website. So this is a shot of Moody Station at the end of the line where we're adding a new bus loop. And this is where the connections will come from Canada in the future and other local routes. So this is, as you drive by this area now, you can really see the elevator banks and other elements coming out of the ground very quickly. So a lot of progress at this site. If you go to the next slide. So in terms of 2022, general progress. By the end of the year, we'll have construction started at all the stations across the entire line. The last couple of stations to come online are Kitchissippi and Westboro. So Kitchissippi is continuing to do excavation at that location. Rail extension or the rail installation on the O Train East extension. You can see a ton of rail now down in that area. Cut and cover, I pointed out that small section of the cut and cover tunnel that's been covered. The Stadler Flirt vehicles are coming. The Alstom Citizen vehicles are still being manufactured and delivered to site. And by the end of the year, there'll be 7 of the 11 pedestrian bridges that we'll be building will be in place, set in place, not open for service, but certainly available to show progress on those points. So go and give the general construction updates on the next slide. We'll go through this quite quickly. So starting in the east, so this was, there's a couple of before and after shots in here. So here you see the before in 2020 with the old transitway structure there. We saw in the video that it getting torn down earlier this year, and obviously the flyover is in place now, and that road is in pretty good shape. If you go to the next slide, you see the new flyover that will be taking the trains to the center track. And so a lot of progress here. We've basically stabilized construction through this area. Now a lot of the effort is on the bridge itself, putting the track in place, and then closer to player doing the tie-ins. So if you go to the next slide. So Montreal Station, so a lot of work was done the last couple of years to make this space available to build the station. This is the view from up top, and so you see the 2 elevator banks at either end of the platform, which will provide you the access from Montreal Road. Still doing tidy up, still doing work on Montreal Road itself. There's still some utility work to do, but the station is coming out of the ground nicely. We're trying to get all the electrical rooms in place so we can start doing communication system and signal system installation next year. Go to the next slide. Greens Creek pedestrian bridge. So this was dropped in earlier in the year. So this is still being worked on. The pathway that connects here all the way back to Blair. It's a lot of construction taking place to make that pathway from Blair to this location. But it is exciting progress here to see this bridge in place. So if we go to the next slide. So this is again a before shot of Jeanne d'Arc Station. Jeanne d'Arc is in the east, is one of those stations where you drive by. It's really amazing to see the great progress that they've been making there. So if you go to the next slide, it shows you Jeanne d'Arc coming out of the ground, and they're onto glazing now. They've wrapped some of the maintenance buildings there with the tiles. So looking very good. They're going to try to get that signal room. There's a signal room in the small building kind of at the lower end of the screen. They want to get the signal room built so that they can start commissioning the signal system that connects to the turnouts that's just to the west of here. So if we go to the next slide. Convent Glen. So Convent Glen Station is a little bit further behind, but this is a slightly older folder. It is coming out of the ground quickly now. We had a couple of delays at this location with the sewer bypass, but it's not quite back on track, but they'll be able to catch up over the coming months in this area. Go to the next slide, please. West Orleans Station. So you see there's 2 structures here. The one on the left, which is the access for pedestrians, people coming from Champlain Bridge, and then the one on the right connecting to the original pedestrian bridge, and then connecting to the new pedestrian bridge, which is going to enable people to transfer from the bus without having to go through a turnstile or fare gate. So you'll be able to transfer directly from here to the train. And then there is one long escalator going from the structure on the right down to platform level, because that is quite a grade separation there. Elevation change at that location. If you go to the next slide, you'll show a slightly closer up picture of this new pedestrian bridge that we're going in place. So there's a bunch of rework that we need to do with the bus loop to enable the transfer and the ease of transfer at this location without having to go through a fare gate. But at the end of the day, this provides a significant extra capacity for people coming and going from the LRT station and the bus loop, in addition to the red pedestrian bridge there, which is the free-flowing pedestrian bridge to get to the mall. Go to the next slide. So rail installation, so making very good progress, basically from here all the way through. So this is just to the one side of Jeanne d'Arc. You see there's a turnout set of crossovers there. So through this area, you can actually see all the overhead catenary poles have been installed as well. So they are looking at stringing catenary wire in the spring, and that will enable us to be able to start doing train movements in this area roughly end of summer, fall next year. So very good progress. And this is this area is looking very kind of neat and tidy. They've cleaned it up. There's still some final paving to do at the end of the project, but making very good progress with the rail in the east. Go to the next slide, please. So trim station. So just so it's a little difficult to make out, but just there's kind of one dark gray honey pole that's kind of in just to the right of the page, and then just to the left of that, there's a couple of pier caps that you can see, or which are for the pedestrian bridge that will take you to the LRT station. And so we're going to have to do a closure of the OR 174 at this location to be able to drop that bridge in place, and then we'll have a pedestrian bridge basically dropping down to a new building entryway with the fare gates in the bus loop. And again, this location will have free access, or not free access, but free flowing access for buses that drop passengers off, and there will also be a set of fare gates for people coming in off the street. So that pedestrian bridge will drop people into the LRT station at this location. Go to the next slide, please. So the upcoming activities, so as I mentioned, the PED bridge, progress on all 5 stations, completion of rail installation. And then next year, we are expecting to see our first train movements in this area. So that's a very exciting milestone for the team when you'll see the train in the middle of the 174 next year. So very excited about that. If you go to the next slide. Just in terms of the project, what we're seeing, so the latest update from the team is that they are 36 days off the original schedule. So they pushed it to January 1st. That being said, the end of the schedule has some float in it, and there's some opportunity to discuss with the builder what the handover process looks like. So we're doing that now, trying to recover those days, but generally the east is still on schedule. Go to the next slide. And then just finally, the mobility impacts in this area. So weekend closure for that, putting that trim pedestrian bridge in, still, a variety of lane closures kind of on and off, some late night stuff. And then Montreal Road, there's some more utility works that need to be done at the station and then on Montreal Road. So still some remaining impacts on the highway, but generally not like what we saw a year ago in terms of the super weekends and the continuous activity. Next slide, please. Talk about the west. So just starting near Tunney's pasture. So this is, you can see this is the old transitway. It's already been excavated. So they're in there now doing utility works. There's a big box culvert that needs some repairs. So they're going to do that work. There's a bit of a ramp down here to get into the guideway to start that retrofit work and make that connection to Tunney's. Go to the next slide. This is Kitchissippi Station. So you see this is a bit of a wet site at the moment, but there is rock excavation here where we need to basically change the direction of the current rock cut to make space for the station. And so the rock excavation in this area is expected to last at least through January. So there's a bit more work to be done to make space for the new station. Obviously, there's drainage and other things that need to be done here before they start the station in earnest. We go to the next slide. Show you the next couple, show you some photos of the SJAM cut and cover. And so we are starting to put the cover on the tunnel. They're using a series of, they're called Everest Travelers, which is basically a movable form that they slide in place, pour the concrete, let it cure, then they move the form down. So they've got 3 of those, and then they've got a 4th Perry form. So they are trying to really make as much progress on this tunnel as possible. If you go to the next slide. See a shot of the tunnel kind of getting closer to the homes, and then just kind of hidden behind the header there is actually where we cross the road to get into Richmond. And so there's been a lot of discussion about that area. It's a very sensitive area. The tunnel's being built over the West Nepean collector, so there's a lot of kind of sensitivities with that final connection across the road into the station location. A lot of work at this location, the SJAM in its entirety, and doing pretty well so far to keep the water out of that tunnel, but you see how close we are there to the river. If you go to the next one, I believe it's there's a, oh, okay, so here's the road connection where we need to cut across the road. And so this is a tough spot because there's a lot of big utilities here and we're over that West Nepean collector. And so what you see at just in the middle of the page there, they're starting to put together that Everest form to be able to build the tunnel. So they are making progress. They are kind of moving on multiple fronts, but there are still a lot of challenges and sensitive areas to get through on this cut and cover tunnel. Go to the next slide, please. Here's again a before of Byron Linear Park in 2020, and then it's not in the exact same location, but the next slide shows you a bit of the after condition. So you see the orange formwork at the bottom there is where we're building tall walls for the station. So those have to have an architectural finish. And then in the distance, as you move kind of up towards the top of the page there, you see the formwork come into play, and the guideway narrows because it goes from the station location, narrows to just the tunnel location. So a lot of work in this location, a lot of activity, a lot of, doing each one of those. You see that orange formwork on the bottom left, doing one of those pours takes about 12 hours. And so there's a lot to do. There's a lot of, on a regular basis, we're having to park concrete delivery trucks and pumper trucks on Byron Road to build those walls. If you go to the next slide, please. So here you see more of the covered section. And so part of this, we do need some of the space for detours to kind of make more space, but they are working quickly to try to get across here. And I don't have a date on when the backfilling will start, but certainly that'll be a big, you see there's kind of at the top of the page, there's a bit of a plug where there's a road access. And so what they'll do is they'll shift that road access to over the tunnel so they can finish off that section of tunnel. So they'll do that progressively as they move through the tunnel area. Go to the next slide, please. And then this is just a close-up of the formwork after the fact. Once you see how that you get a very good finish on the concrete there with the Everest form system. So good progress there. And as I said, roughly 200 meters of the 2.8 or 2,800 meters has been completed to date. So next year is going to be a big year to make progress on this, and they are going to work on these sections over the winter. So they're going to do as much as they can. They've come up with a temporary tent structure that they're going to move along the guideway to essentially help them continue the progress of this work during winter. If you go to the next slide, please. So New Orchard Station. So again, just kind of a shot from the ground level. You see those big panels that they use for making the walls of the station. And then you see a bit of an architectural structure coming across through the middle of the station. So there'll be some struts that connect the two stations and a bit of a feature there. If you go to the next slide, please. So here's the before Lincoln Fields. And so you see the magnitude of the bus loop in this area. You see the original kind of transitway pedestrian bridge there. So there's been a lot of shifting around. We certainly appreciate customers' patience and accommodating all the changes. We've had to make a number of changes, and there's probably more to come. We're adding a new ramp to get buses down to the new lower loop. We'll show you on the next page the current status of this location. So you see just at the bottom of the page on the left, we've built a new temporary bus loop. You see the old pedestrian bridge for the transitway coming apart. You see right now buses are kind of navigating across on the top left where the guideway is going to run. And so we're actually going to have to detour the buses using a new ramp to stay away from that area as we build the guideway basically on this page left to right. And then on the right-hand side, Carling Road, we've had to put in a new bridge and build a structure to make space under the tunnel for the LRT at this location. So if you go to the next slide, please. Just another shot of Lincoln Field Station. Here you can see the new bridge on Carling Avenue where we've created space for the LRT to go underneath. And on the right-hand side is where the temporary bus loop is, and then in the end state, the bus loop is actually on the left of the screen. And so where those trailers are parked, that's where the ultimate configuration is going to be. Go to the next slide. Carling Avenue Bridge there. So we are making space, and we are reallocating some of the sidewalk space to the system to make it as friendly as possible to get to the station. If you go to the next slide, please. just a little bit further down the line. So see Lincoln Fields flyover. And then in the distance, you see the Woodruff pedestrian bridge there. So a lot of work happening in this area. We are keeping the transitway in this area open as long as possible. So the transitway will stay open and will be maintained in parallel with the new LRT guideway that we're building that goes up to Iris. But a lot of activity, and we need to basically make the connection through this location back to Lincoln Fields. That's where you have a 3-track station, and that's where the trains split. Trains will go south to Algonquin, and then trains will go the other direction to Moody. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is Iris Station area in 2020. So this is, again, a lot of utility work. There's a Pinecrest Creek in this location, which we had to redirect, and then we had to build a new road bridge to get over the LRT. So on the next slide, you see that we made good progress on the road bridge. So there's the new road bridge that's going to go over the LRT. You see Iris Station there, kind of on either side of the guideway. On the lower right-hand side, you see where we've detoured the transitway. And so that transitway will stay in service until we put the LRT into service. And once the LRT is into service, then we'll come back and we'll decommission that roadway and we'll finish the work on Pinecrest Creek. You see it's in a realigned location just on the right-hand side there, but still kind of a lot of staging in this area. We have to come back after the fact to clean it up and finish the landscaping. So lots more work to come in this area, but the station is coming out of the ground very, very nicely now. If you go to the next slide. Pinecrest storm water management pond. So another kind of one of the bundled projects with this activity. So this is all about, tempering the flows to Pinecrest Creek. It's all part of an integrated strategy to improve the quality and health of that creek. And so a lot of work here, but still more to come before this is finished and put into service. To go to the next slide, please. Algonquin Station. So you see on the right is there's a pier there where the new pedestrian bridge is going to provide a direct connection from Algonquin into the station. The station's coming together very nicely. Again, there'll be a bus loop connections here. This is one of 2 buildings that's being built. And then the station at this location is underground. Go to the next station slide, please. So switching from Algonquin Station, which is kind of the southern leg, back over to the leg that's running to the west, Queensview Station here. So this is what you can actually see on the right-hand side in the middle of the page. There's a bit of a green area. That's where a footing is going to be poured. So we're putting in a pedestrian bridge over the highway at this location so people on the one side can get to Queensview. And then the top left, hiding behind the banner, is the existing Pinecrest bus garage. So we are doing a lot in this area to try to improve the connectivity, but this is providing a good access point to the businesses in this area and the homes in this area. If you go to the next slide, please. So Pinecrest Station, so this is the location before, and so it's some of the changes are subtle in the after, but we've adjusted basically all the ramps. We've closed the ramps on the bottom, looking to reopen those next year. There is a new bus only ramp. So on the next slide, you'll see the progress on the station. So we've moved ramps out of the way to make space for the station. We've created a bridge structure that we pushed in place last year. I'll just wait for the next slide to come up. There you go. So the structure, so you see the one ramp there with the blacker looking pavement was rebuilt, and then the Pinecrest Station there, it's coming together. Those struts that go across the 2 walls are permanent, and then there'll be a little bit of a bus loop just on the kind of the upper location of the page, and then off the screen is all the new ramps that we're rebuilding to make space for the LRT. If you go to the next slide, please. Bayshore Station. So this is where, we basically have access to the guideway here. We're repurposing as much of the building as possible to make way for the new LRT. And then you see a bit of a bus loop. There's been a lot of changes in this area to accommodate the buses and to deal with the temporary bus loop configurations. Go to the next slide, please. So Moody Station. So if you drive past this area, those 2 elevator banks, which is the steel structures, really pop out at you. It feels pretty close to the highway, but we've we've basically squeezed it in between the highway on one side and NCC lands on the other. So it's a tight spot, but it's a good location. And this is, I showed you the rendering at the start of this presentation for what this will look like in the end state. So this location is coming together nicely. So go to the next slide. So Moody Interchange, again, another location where we had to rebuild all of the interchange ramps to make space and for the LRT to go under the structure. If you go to the next slide. Couple slides here on the maintenance facility. So we're starting to see the maintenance facility stabilize in terms of the work that's being done. It is still on schedule. The original schedule was for them to hand over in 2023 so that we could use it for additional vehicles. And we are working with Kiewit Eurovia Vinci to come up with a plan to deliver vehicles here. So to enable early testing, but also to just in terms of a space issue to provide more capacity at Belfast just to move trains around. So good progress on this site and still scheduled for handover in 2023. Let's go to the next slide. So what you're seeing in kind of in the middle is there's a very large substation that we have to put at this location to provide the power to the station, nearby station as well as to the yard. So a lot of electrical activity that needs to be done over the coming year to get this into service. Go to the next slide, please. And then just a shot from up above. Next slide, please. So the big, I would say one of the big milestones in the West was delivering the rail. And so we are actually going to start seeing rail go down in the yard and in that section between Bayshore and Moody Drive fairly quickly here. So all the catenary pole bases have been poured and are ready to go. Once they have the rail in place, then that's when the team will come back and start doing work on the catenary. But big milestone with getting rail delivered to the West in this photo. Go to the next slide, please. So just some upcoming construction activities. So construction on all stations, excavation covering cut and cover tunnels will continue. So that's the big challenge right now is the productivity levels on the cut and cover tunnel have not achieved what we need to maintain schedule. And so I'll talk about that in a second. And then the LMSF buildings, basically getting them closed up for the winter so that the interior commissioning can happen and the handover can happen for 2023. So LMSF certainly being a success story on the West for us with this project. If you go to the next slide. So one of the challenges on the West project is really the production levels that we see to build the tunnel, the availability of concrete, the availability of rebar, the availability of waterproofing material has impacted the project. There is a shortage of resources to be able to build the project. So they're struggling to maintain the schedule in this area. We're seeing a delay of 17 months in the West. There is still, some discussions to be had with the consortium to understand how much that can be brought back next year and what opportunities exist at the end of the project during the commissioning process to take some of the lessons learned from the East and apply them to the West to be able to catch up some of that time. So we are in delay in the West, still on schedule in the East, but just wanted to give you that update on the project schedule. So we go to the next slide. So the West, there are still a series of mobility impacts and roadway impacts. Some of these are kind of permanent now, where, for example, the first one, Dominion to Tunney's, we've pushed all the traffic onto Scott. Richmond Road, we're doing an Ambleside detour through next year. So we're looking at the timing of that and how much we can maximize the benefit of that. And then Richmond Road, just with all the staging, we've had to, on a regular basis, do flagging, different things to get people through. And then Woodruff, there is a bit of a closure required next year to finish off the road over the tunnel. So we go to the next one. There's another list of some impacts. So Carling Avenue, so we're finishing off the bridge there, hoping to kind of reinstate traffic to a normal condition. Transaway, that's essentially a Pinecrest to Bayshore permanent closure now that we've handed that over to Guideway. The Highway 417 and Pinecrest interchange, and so that westbound off-ramp is still closed to traffic, and we are working closely with Kev to understand when that will open, but I think they are seeing a couple of months. Originally, they were hoping for spring, but now it looks like it's going to be through the summer. And then there's some work to be done to get the pedestrian bridge in place at Queensview and some other things. So there would be some additional closures that we need to do on weekends to get additional work completed. Let's go to the next slide. Should just talk, the next slide talks about the segment Algonquin. So obviously that Iris to baseline, we've closed that. Lincoln Fields to Iris, we're maintaining that in place. Woodruff pedestrian bridge, we are looking to get this back in place and open that up in the spring of 2023. We ran into some challenges with utility works in that location. And then Corksdown, there are some impacts on the station construction on Corksdown Road. And so we're going to have to reduce for a period to a single direction. So, but again, that's just temporary. The final condition for Corksdown Road is a two-way condition. Go to the next slide. And then in parallel with the project that Kev is doing, we are still producing more Citadis vehicles. 9 have been accepted. There's 4 that are in final testing, final inspection. And so that's going to bring us to a number 13, obviously, it's simple math. And then we're expecting a couple more. And then we'll be in a good shape in terms of fleet size for the east opening. And the additional vehicles won't be required until we open the west. And so that we are in good shape there in terms of the fleet size. Obviously, the transit team is still following up on some of the stage 1 issues to make sure those are all cleaned up in time for stage 2. Go to the next slide. So we'll talk about the O Train South right at Bayview. So this is now feels like an old photo, but it's a recent photo of the progress at the station. You see the structure in the middle there with the kind of the green edge on the roof. So that's actually and then on the right hand side, there's a pier cap. So we're actually putting in a pedestrian bridge that will connect to the future tower at that location. So that's being installed shortly. Track is being installed through this area. You see the turnouts, you see the double platform at this location. So a lot of progress at Bayview Station. If you go to the next station, Corso Italia on the next slide. So here's the track work that's being installed at Bayview. So you go by there, it's a lot of activity. And in general, the strategy with track is they need to get the track completed all across the entire Trillium line this year to enable testing and the overall program next spring. And so I checked in with the team on Monday, they're at about 65% completion of track across the alignment. Much of the track you can't see because it's often in areas that are inaccessible by road, but they are about 65% and they are looking to finish that all up this year. If you go to the next slide. So this is the before of Corso Italia. So a couple of years ago, we were just getting set up to do the excavation in this area. And then if you go to the next slide, you see the current progress. So this is a few weeks ago. So they're starting to stage track through this area. On the bottom of the page, you see the additional emergency exits. On the top of the page, you see the plaza area that's being built that's connecting to Gladstone. And then you see the platform that's being built up. And then, left and right of this new building. So left is OCH development, right is there's development application in to turn that existing building into towers. And so there's going to be a lot of people living around this area, which will be very exciting for them to have a new station. So go to the next slide. So Dow's Lake Station. So on the right-hand side, you see they've already wrapped the elevator bank for winter to be able to work on the elevators. So we're putting in a redundant elevator bank for winter. So they've wrapped that. They're starting to bring track through this area. So they are making good progress on this station. Go to the next one. Carlton Station. So one of the things you'll notice there is the yellow barrier on the edge of the platform, which is we used to have platform extenders that were kind of intermittent on the original system. So now we've done a platform extender that's the full length. But when you see those platform extenders, it basically shows that the platform's almost finished. They've actually put down a thin plywood material to protect the surface of the platform while they finish construction. But the fencing's going up, the platform transit shelters are going up. So this is coming along nicely, and they're expecting to get track through this area shortly if they haven't started already. If you go to the next slide, please. So just another view there. So you see again, that platform edge extender, and down the middle is where there's going to be an inner track barrier. But they're generally they're at the point now where they're into the finishings, the electrical work at this location. So good progress at Carlton. Next slide, please. So a couple couple big things going on here. Obviously, the River pedestrian bridge was dropped in place. It required a very large crane that had to be rescheduled following the operator strike for that structure. And then in the middle, so this is where they're starting to demobilize now at this location and take down all the scaffolding, but that's the, you know, the original train bridge, which is being essentially been rehabilitated to give it 30 years more of life. It'll be rehabilitated at the end of the project as well. But a lot of work done to that bridge and that structure, especially on the southern side. The pier required a ton of extra work. So kudos to TNEX and their engineers for doing repairs and getting that in working order. So still a lot of activity in this location. A lot of questions about that pedestrian bridge. I know there's a lot of excitement about that, but at this point it is going to be next year before it opens. If you go to the next slide. So Mooney's Base Station. So again, this station's pretty advanced. You see that plywood that's down on the platform is meant to protect the surface of the station. So they are making good progress and they are bringing track through here pretty quickly. If you go to the next slide. Elwood Diamond. So this is the grade separation over a via. So they've been making very good progress here. They are looking at reinstating the original multi-use pathway on the southern side. I think there's actively working on it now. I don't know when it will reopen, but a lot of kind of interfaces between the via rail, between the transway, between the creek, between the multi-use pathways in this area, but they have made good progress on this bridge. And this is the type of thing they can actually bring the rail onto the structure over winter. And so that's what they may do. Go to the next slide, please. So Walkley Station, again, you see that yellow platform edge extender in there. See they're tarping up some of the elevator banks there to allow us to work on them through winter, but getting to a pretty good state here. On the right hand side, you kind of see the beginnings of the multi-use pathway that will go up to Walkley Road. And then we have spoken to the planning department, and there's a private connection through to Bank from just kind of the middle of the page, and that's scheduled for 2023 now, being done through the local developer that put up the new rental building just on the right there. So you go to the next slide. So the MSF, so there's a couple of photos here. So we're making good progress in terms of the MSF. I believe the gas connection is all done now, so they can start final commissioning on all the systems ahead of getting occupancy. So this is kind of the primary maintenance building for the heavy maintenance as well as the light maintenance. There's an administrative building on the left. The next, I believe there's a second photo. If you go to the next slide. Which shows a train inspection building. So there is actually quite an increase in capacity here. So we've got the 2 full bays in the maintenance building, and then we've got the 2 full bays in the train inspection building. This building is what they'll be using for washing the vehicles, refueling, resanding, all of those things, cleaning the vehicles, making sure they're ready for the next day. So a lot of extra maintenance capacity at this facility now that we've done the expansion. Go to the next slide, please. Guideway progress. So I spoke about it briefly. So this is just a shot looking south. This is where the track kind of disappears into the forest and you can't follow its progress. But from here it goes, we created a test track down to Leitrim. There is track all the way through. I mean, it's through to Leitrim and beyond. There's some small gaps by Limebank and a couple other spots, but you also see kind of where the vehicles will turn off to go to the airport on the right here. So a lot of activity at this location, or a lot of progress here. We just need the final connection across Hunt Club to really close the gap here. Go to the next one. The Greenboro Station. So this one's in pretty good shape. I think it's like at 80 or 90%. Again, we're just finishing up. There are some glass barriers at this location with the bird-friendly glass and just to provide a little bit of shelter because this location is a little bit exposed. If you go to the next station, next slide. Rather. So South Key Station. So you start to see at the bottom of the screen, you see the bit of a three track structure for the passing movements for the airport train to come in and out. This station is coming along nicely. And again, they're using some tarping to be able to kind of work on the elevators over winter. Go to the next slide, please. Leitrim Station. So here you see the track. The track is through on both sides now, and they are enclosing this, starting to put glazing up, and so a lot of good progress at this location as well. And obviously, there's all the bus loop reconfiguration that needs to be done next summer ahead of opening. Go to the next slide, please. Boseville Station, so much further to the south. So again, wrapping, you see the wrapping there to be able to work on the elevators during winter. You see, the structures come up pretty well. The bus operator building on the kind of the left middle, and then the Fairgate entrance in the bottom left there quadrant. So it's coming together nicely. This station's pretty advanced, actually. Go to the next slide. Line Bank Station, the before. So this is a couple years ago now. And then if you go quickly to the current photo, you'll see it's this is actually a little while ago. They're doing the waterproofing on the decking. They're going to bring the ballast through. They've got the elevators wrapped so they can work on those through winter. And this is kind of one of the last segments of track in the south that needs to be done between here through to roughly Mosquito Creek. But they'll be able to get on that quickly now that I believe the waterproofing is complete on the structure. Go to the next slide. Flip over to the airport link. Upland Station, good progress here. So this is kind of one of the, just on the top of the page is where the airport trains from the airport parkway come through Upland Station, and then just kind of behind us on this page is where the link to the airport is. So this is kind of one of those, again, another gap in the track, but it's one of those areas that they're going to fill in quickly now that they've advanced the station works. So we go to the next slide. You'll see the final approach to the airport on this slide and the plinths, the concrete plinths. So the rail will actually be mounted on those plinths. The train will stop at this location. There's a platform on the left, and then it connects to the plaza building that the airport has constructed. So, they're in pretty good shape here to be able to come and get the rail in pretty quickly over the coming months. Go to the next slide, please. So just in terms of updates, and so I think I got a text from someone this morning and planning talking about this, the Trinity pedestrian bridge. I don't know if it's going to still be called the Trinity pedestrian bridge, but the pedestrian bridge at Bayview Station is going in shortly. We should see that go in. Station and bridge construction completion. So all the bridges, Hunt Club is really the last one that needs a little bit of attention. Track across the network. Again, we're at about 65% installed of track work, and then continued Stadler vehicle testing and commissioning. So those vehicles have been here for a while now, and we've been doing as much as we can. The next real big milestone for those vehicles is to be able to run them north and south across the line. If you go to the next slide. So we are, in terms of the schedule for the Trillium line, we have been working closely with TNEX to understand, what the opportunities are to bring the schedule back. Right now, we're looking at a handover in August 2023, and then potentially putting it into service in September. So that's the current date, but really it was about sliding out of the commissioning, trial running, but all linked. The main driver on this page is the completion of the guideway, which once that is done, once the track is in place, that basically unlocks a lot of the testing and commissioning activities. We've been doing a lot of concurrent commissioning activities, trying to do early testing of the signal system, early testing of the SCADA systems, all to enable a quick handover once it's done. But if we can get the track completed this year, then that sets us up well for starting the Siemens signal testing in the spring, and sets us up well for a potential August handover to the city. So that's what we're working on with the Trillium line schedule. In terms of mobility impacts, I believe there's a slide on that. So still, the biggest thing being a few of these MUPs. There's a variety of closures at a few different locations that we're working on. So I think these ones are fairly well known. If you go to the next slide. Some additional work here. The MUP at Carling, there is to connect the utilities to the station at that location. Has a pretty big impact at the MUP right at that location. Hunt Club, there's going to be some kind of on and off closures required to finish that up. Earl Armstrong Road and Boseville Road, this is where we're realigning the road to take out, there's that funny jog. So we're realigning the road to put in the traffic lights. So that's going to have some impacts to do that work. Then Carling Avenue, to get the utilities to the location, requires some impacts. And then the Trillium line MUP at Carling or at Dow's Lake has some big impacts because of the utility connections. So still trying to close those out as much as possible. Go to the next slide. So Stadler flirts. So there's just, all all 7 vehicles are now on site. They've all been inspected. City team is very happy with what they're seeing in terms of the performance. I think the operators are quite happy with them as well. So those are all staged now at Walkley Yard along with the existing 6 Halston lints. So we have the full fleet for the Trillium line here ready to go. And then I think the next slide is just the last one, which just kind of wraps up the completion dates and where we are. So South Extension targeting at August, September timeline. O-Train East Extension still on for end of 2024, and then O-Train West Extension now pushing into late 2026. So that's the end of my presentation, Mr. Mayor. Happy to answer questions and if there are any.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Morgan. Just a couple of points. One, with respect to some of the reasons for delays. I'm assuming it's supply chain issues, labor issues. Could you give us a little breakdown in terms of what, I know this may be difficult to pin down to a number, but what percent of the delays are as a result of labor issues, not being able to get people on site because of COVID and so on, and then supply chain issues? Is there something specifically with, like, for instance, the rail lines themselves coming from, I think, Spain? Has that slowed things down on the mostly the west, because east is in pretty good shape and south is not as bad as the west? Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of generally in Ontario right now, there is we're seeing a lot of projects in delay. We're seeing a lot of pressure on the availability of craft to actually undertake the work. So this is people who are doing rebar, people who are pouring concrete, people who are kind of building stations. And so that's because we're building a cut and cover through the west, that has a big impact on the timelines for the project. And then there has been some challenges. There is a shortage of cement in North America at the moment. And so that's obviously affecting concrete production. They've had some challenges with rebar. They've had some challenges with the waterproofing. So it's hard to pinpoint a percentage, but it's basically a breakdown between some material issues, supply issues, rebar, concrete, waterproofing, craft issues, things like rail. So the rail was ordered early, and as I showed you the photo, it's been delivered to the west to be able to start that work. But I would say everything in the supply chain, the teams have had to work very hard at managing those. So, for example, concrete ties, there's been a lot of discussions back and forth with the manufacturers in Maryland to get access to those ties, because there are a lot of projects that are putting pressure on that factory to provide those. So big impacts across the board. I think it's affecting utilities have the same impacts. There's been a number of impacts this year, strikes. The big storm had some impacts in terms of availability of Hydro Ottawa. Even the things like the trucker convoy had impacts in terms of not being able to make changes to traffic signals because, of the unavailability of police officers. So this was a difficult year in terms of like the first 6 months. So there being a number of real impacts that had to get worked through, and then piling on just the supply issues, having to work on those every day to make sure that they don't impact or slow down the project.
Great, thank you. And just as an aside, you referred to the Algonquin station as Algonquin. Did we change that name? Because I know Algonquin College would like it changed to Algonquin.
I believe we did, sir.
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Mayor.
you. Councillor Kavanaugh, and congratulations on your re-election.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Michael and his team for constant communication. It's a huge impact on Bay Ward with 7 stations, and actually Kitchissippi's just on the edge, so almost 8. It's a lot of work. With all these delays, one of the concerns of residents, because it's these residents are the closest to the work, as we saw in the east. It's going down a highway. It's not near residents. In Bay Ward, it's very much practically in people's backyards. And I'm concerned about overnight work, if it's going to increase, because of course that's been a huge issue. This is not just a project for a year or 2 years, it's 3 years, it's 4 years. It's a huge impact on people's mental health. And we want to know how that's going to be controlled, and and keep in consideration the residents of the area.
Yes, absolutely. So, Mr. Mayor, the construction of the tunnel, as we start to close it up and we force, eventually, once we kind of hit a critical mass of that work, the work will be forced inside. And so I think as a result, we'll have the benefit of being able to do all the electrical work, the rail work, all of that kind of in an indoor space that will help restrict the noise and the impacts from the local residents. You know, the big impacts that we hear about today are the temporary Roosevelt Bridge, obviously the rock excavation at Kitchissippi Station, which is very close to some homes. And then kind of at the far end, there's still some excavation happening kind of in and around people's homes, and, you know, having to very tightly manage lights and lights pointing the wrong direction and things happening. We are cognizant of the impacts, and we are trying to be very responsive when somebody kind of puts in, shines a construction light in the wrong direction by accident. We try to respond to that quickly. But ideally, some of these really big impacts, like rock excavation, will kind of come to an end in the near future.
I appreciate that, and so do the residents. The other concern is the is routes for pedestrians. When we make detours, we're, you know, it's usually about cars, and we have to make sure that we constantly think of pedestrians and cyclists. I appreciate that with the unfortunate delay of the pedestrian bridge at Woodruff from Woodruff High School, that's caused a lot of inconvenience, but appreciate the work that was done to make a safe route for residents. Unfortunately, on the north side of Carling, people are still walking on the, like in front of cars, like it's terrible. It's really hard to get people to take a very convoluted route. So I'm hoping that'll open soon, the north side of Carling near the station for pedestrian safety. And of course, that is, you know, it's going to be all about connectivity, because people are going to be walking to stations. We're going to be, so I hope the conversations are going on with the NCC about improving the routes and those connections to get to the station for pedestrians and cyclists.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that Carling is definitely a pinch point for us to, as we built that bridge, but we have completed the last deck pour on Carling Avenue. And so we should be able to very soon have line of sight on when we can kind of restore the original traffic patterns on Carling to make that one location safer. But you're right, there are a series of impacts. Kitchissippi Station has a challenging bus stop that is right on one side of where we need to build a rock cut. So there's some spots that are difficult. Obviously, getting Woodruff Pedestrian Bridge back into service will provide some relief to the community.
I appreciate it very much. I'll let my colleagues ask questions now. Thank you.
Right. Excuse me. Thank you very much. And Councillor Menard, congratulations on your election as well.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate it. And thanks to staff for the presentation today. I appreciate getting an update. One of the pieces that for me is important relates to the confidence levels of when we launch stage 2, because a number of pieces fall from that. So our, Bronson reconstruction, Carleton University student service. So are we confident in that August handover? I mean, I guess what would you say your confidence level is in that August 2023 handover? And what might be the impediments to us achieving that date?
Mr. Mayor, I would say that the August handover is still a stretch target, still will require a lot of effort. There's a couple of, and my confidence will build. It's hard to put a number to it today, but certainly it will build over time. If they're able to complete the track, the majority, if not all of the ballasted track this fall, that should give us some confidence that they will be able to start the signal testing in the spring. We've done some early signal testing with the Siemens train control system to try to flush out any issues, but they will, start end-to-end testing in the spring timeframe. So April, May. Right away, we'll have a pretty good sense of, are there bugs, are there challenges, are there things that we need to kind of work out. And so, if the signal testing goes well, right out of the gate, then I think that'll give us additional confidence. And then the last couple of pieces are, wanting to make sure that, training is 100%, that there's no shortcuts to training for staff. We are making some, like in the past, when we were on the Trillium line, we did the rail dispatch using a third party out of Montreal. And so now we've brought the rail dispatch in-house. I think it's an improved solution because our operators will have access to cameras and access to special constables and access to all kind of the tools at their fingertips, but it is a new function. It's akin to what we did with the Confed line. So wanting to make sure that's right. And then, obviously we need, for this line, we need Transport Canada approval in the form of a railway operating certificate. And we need approval from the Canadian Transportation Agency in the form of a certificate of fitness to run the service. So there's some additional kind of hurdles to get through. But, we're working on all of those every day. And so if we see an issue with either the track completion this fall or the start of a signal testing in the spring, that'll tell us whether we have an issue or not with the August handover.
That's very helpful. And I guess my preoccupation is just mitigation as we move along. The Carleton coming back this September, the expectation previously was we'd have it running. It's not, but we have some loading issues. Maybe there's some positivity in that people want to take the bus again, but there's been real difficulties for students with the 7, the 10, the 11, the 2. And so in the meantime, though it may not be running, the train may not be running, we need to, I think, supplement service there. And I've raised it with Pat Scrimger as well around some of these bus crush loads that are happening for students who utilize the U-Pass and a source of revenue for the city, even through pandemic times. We need to make sure they're well served. So I just want to raise that those bus numbers are continue to be a challenge for students, and we'd like to see some mitigation as a result of the delay in the line launching. My last question is just around a construction timeline for finishing and opening up the PED bridge, the pedestrian bridge between Carleton and Vincent Massey. I know my colleague, Councillor Brockington, has been working with staff, but when can we get an actual timeline for that? So when it will be open? It's been put into place, and we were expecting sometime this winter, but when can we just get the timeline on construction and when it will open?
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, the remaining works on the Rideau River pedestrian bridge include, there's some civil works for the approaches, there's concrete works for the decking, and then there's electrical work. And right now, all those works are also, those types of works and this type of craft are required on the main line. And so we've been prioritizing the main stations and the guideway. We are expecting them to restart that pedestrian bridge in the spring. And once they do that, and we see kind of how, their initial production levels in terms of getting that work completed, then we'll be able to give a firmer date. But right now, all we've been able to say is that it's roughly a 4-month timeline and that they're going to restart that work in the spring.
Okay, I just appreciate a proper timeline for the construction outlook on this one when we get it in the near future, so we can inform students, staff, faculty, people that use that NCC path. Thanks very much to staff for the presentation. Appreciate it very much, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington, and congratulations to you on re-election as well in River War.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning to you and colleagues. I too appreciate the update from our staff on this major infrastructure project. And I just want to ask first questions about timelines. Does staff believe that the original timelines and delivery dates of the Eastern Line, the Southern Line, and the Western Lines were realistic and doable to begin with?
So, Mr. Mayor, for the East, we've seen that the team has been able to achieve that timeline roughly. It's plus or minus. They're 36 day delay today, but largely they've achieved that timeline. And I think it's, when we went to procurement, all the teams came back with longer timelines on the Confederation line than were originally included in the reference design. And so I think, I think that was the market telling us what those timelines should be. I think, unfortunately, for the West, there's been some challenges and there's been some impacts due to a variety of things. I don't want to spend too much time on those now. So, absent some of those impacts, I think a 1.5 years is still a fairly substantial delay. On the Trillium line north-south, I think the volume of work that was included in that project, if you look at the volume of rework that they've done on things like the Dow's Lake Tunnel, things like the Rideau River pedestrian bridge, some of it could be down to execution challenges. Was it an overly optimistic schedule? It's tough to say at this point. There's been too many kind of changes to the environment to know if that original schedule would have held true on the north-south line.
Yeah, I ask because there'll be future phase of LRT, and it's important that when timelines are established, they factor in all of the concerns. South, we knew there was going to be bridges built and work in this regard. So it's important going forward that we have that realistic timetable at the beginning. You had mentioned the Dow's Lake, you were showing the Dow's Lake work. And my understanding was when the tower that's going to be built that abuts Dow's Lake Station, the station is actually going to be partly embedded in that building. So can you just clarify, when that tower is eventually built, will there be more station work done at Dow's Lake Station, or have those plans evolved, and what's happening at Dow's Lake Station is what the station's going to look like in the future?
So at Bayview Station, there is a pedestrian bridge that will connect to a future tower. At Dow's Lake Station, the only thing that's in the plan is what's being built now. There is a scenario where in the future one could come back and widen the guideway and do a double track platform. But today, the only thing that's being built is that extended platform and the dual elevator bank. There's no connection to an adjacent tower.
No, my understanding is that block on the north side of Carling is going to yield a number of towers, one of which is where the current car dealership is. There's no tower at all. With that tower in such close proximity to the station, my understanding, this is going back a number of years, similar to in downtown Toronto or Montreal, where the station entrance and part of the station is actually in the building. Is that still in the plans, or again, is what's being built at Dow's Lake the final look of that station?
That's the final look for the station as part of this project.
Okay, fair enough. You made a comment about Walkley Station, that when the two new condo towers that are being built at the southern end of this area are done, the MUP, did I hear you correctly, will then be extended to wrap around? And if that's true, will it stop at the RioCan property line, or will that be extended all the way to Bank Street, which is planned?
My understanding is that the developer is putting in a connection to Bank Street on kind of at the southern end of that station. And so we're building a multi-use pathway that goes up the hill to connect with Walkley Road, and that there's another new connection being built by the developer that connects to Bank.
But is that under the same timelines of 2023?
We reached out to the planning team the other day and they said 2023, yes.
Excellent. And my last question is regarding Greenboro Station, staying in the south end. Will there be a connection between the western edge of Greenboro Station and the multi-use pathway, which is right beside the Sawmill Creek pathway?
Today, there's no connection.
And how feasible is that, given that they're right beside each other?
You would have to go under the station. I think, it would be a bit of work.
Fair enough. Okay. Obviously, I'm not asking for that be done now, but there's that pathway is becoming more and more used, and that issue was raised certainly on the recent campaign trail, and something that I'd like to chat with OC at a future date. But again, thank you for the update on this very important infrastructure project.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leeper, please, and congratulations to you as well in your win in Gitchissippi.
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to the post RSA works that remain to be done, I'm wondering what the timeline is. So the west extension, we're looking at 3/4 of the way through 2026. Obviously, that timing is going to move around. That's a long way off. But the Churchill Scott intersection is problematic. There's a temporary transit way that runs parallel between Kitchissippi Station and Churchill Avenue. There's landscaping restitution to be done. What is the timeline for some of that post RSA service once the train starts running?
Mr. Mayor, I have to go back and look at the updated schedule to see how quickly they think they can do that work. You know, there's a couple of the Churchill Transitway connection is a big one, obviously. The other big one is the restoration works, basically between Iris Station and Lincoln Field Station. So those are the two big projects that are kind of post opening, largely because we need to turn off the buses and turn down that section of the bus network once the LRT is in service. So I'd have to follow up on the duration of those times, but I know that the contractor is eager to finish as much as possible before the end date. Like they're motivated to finish the work quickly. It's not shouldn't be a 2-year project to get that stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, that temporary transit way that runs parallel to the current trench, you know, that needs to all be removed and turned into, and then the restoration of the Roosevelt pedestrian bridge would be part of those works as well, right? So we're very keen to get that pedestrian bridge. Let me follow up with you offline to see whether there's some insight into how long that might take, because it is important to the residents there. I do appreciate your acknowledgement that the Bailey Bridge continues to be problematic with respect to noise. My understanding is that OC and Kev have done all the mitigation work that they believe they can do on it. Are there any other solutions not yet tried with respect to mitigating that noise?
Again, I'd have to, Mr. Mayor, I'd have to follow up with to answer the question, follow up with Kev to see if there's anything else, but we've tried, added additional echo barriers. We want to take some noise measurements now that those are in place. There was a discussion this morning with transit operations about just kind of enforcement of the stop and start, the bus speeds over the bridge to minimize the noise. There were some additional things that Kev was working on to try to minimize it. I don't have to go back and see how effective they were, but I think we're almost to the end of what we can do, but we'll keep looking for sure.
Okay, I'll head out sometime in the next couple of nights to give that a listen, because my understanding is most of the mitigations are in place. And it's unfortunate that a lot of expensive mitigation has had to be put in place. If the buses stopped where they were supposed to stop on a consistent basis, we wouldn't need that. So I would urge you to continue to work on enforcement measures with the drivers. I don't think they understand necessarily the impact they're having when they don't obey the stop restrictions on the bridge. Okay, and actually those are my questions. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you. This question is about the noise mitigation following Councillor Leeper, for when the tracks are operating and the trains are operating, especially on curves. The big concern is the one that is towards Lincoln Field. We've talked about this before, and it's about lessons learned from stage 1, and what are we doing specifically to make sure that we will not see repeat issues of noise on curves.
So, Mr. Mayor, on noise in the west, there's a number of locations where we are putting in some mitigations, and so there are locations similar to what we did at Parkdale, where we're putting in rail dampers. There's locations where we're putting in a short noise wall. There's the option to put in rail dampers on those curves. Critically, in terms of the curves, though, we are working with RTG to look at how do we optimize the wheel rail interface to make sure that location we don't run into those challenges. Primarily it starts with the railhead condition and the wheel condition, and from there you're looking to mitigate. But if we can correct the issue at the source, then or minimize the issue at the source, then that will make all the other mitigations even more effective. And so there is a program that we are working with RTG to assess and understand and make sure that wheel rail interface is optimized. That would be the first thing. And then the second thing is we are through the project, the infrastructure construction, we are putting in a series of mitigations to help minimize the impacts for those locations where we are very close to some homes.
I appreciate that. And of course, that we even have a condo building that's, where we've got a very sharp curve. I guess the one concern was just the decibel level was not agreed upon. It just seemed that it was very high. What is considered to be the acceptable decibel level?
Mr. Mayor, there are some challenges in respect of the decibel levels when you're going into neighborhoods as part of the kind of the transit study noise assessments to understand what is the impact. In locations where you already have a high impact due to local traffic, the approach can be slightly different than areas where there's no kind of high background noise to begin with. And so we have been trying to minimize the numbers, but there is a bit of a range depending on the location and depending on the proximity to the homes and the impact of the existing traffic levels. And so it's not an easy number. I can't put a number to it. It's one of the scenarios where we do a case-by-case analysis for each location to understand what the impacts are in order to minimize the impacts at those locations.
I appreciate, and I expect we'll have more community meetings to discuss these in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Michael, for your presentation. With some of the delay you talked about earlier, Michael, with the increase of cost, we all understand with the construction, with the cement, with the steel, with other, will that be still covered with the contingency we have set aside, or there might be some call for additional funding to be able to complete the work?
Mr. Mayor, with the project delays generally, we're going to have to keep the city's oversight office open longer. And so there will be kind of a pressure on contingency for that. We have been working through all the lessons learned and the impacts in areas like noise mitigations, where we want to kind of increase the level of kind of control we have over the system. So those create impacts there. And then generally we're seeing kind of, as you do in most construction projects, as you get closer to the end, that's when the claims come in. And so, you need to treat each of those as they come, and potentially there will be some impact on contingency as a result of that as well.
Do we have any idea at this time what, with the contingency, how, is additional cost, or we don't have a clear number at this point?
Today, we don't have a clear number in terms of what the pressure would be, but and then in terms of the claims, we're happy to have that discussion with legal counsel and counsel, which I think is scheduled shortly.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hubley, please. Congratulations, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up, Michael, on that point. The Ottawa Citizen recently posted a story that said the LRT Phase 1 was $1 billion over budget. You're talking about some contingency funds that would be used, but at this point, the project is or is not over budget?
Mr. Mayor, in terms of the Stage 1 project and the Stage 1 budget, we did request an increase of $15 million to the contingency fund last year, but we've not spent that amount yet. So there's still remaining funds in the Stage 1 budget.
So we're still on budget with the exception of that 15 million if we use it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for a clear answer on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I want to get on the record.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we'll, now head over to item 9.1, City Manager's Office, update on Ottawa Light Rail Transit Public Inquiry and recommended next steps. Mise à jour enquête publique sur le réseau de transport commun par train à gestion réelle d'Ottawa. Councillor Dudas, if you would move the motion, please, that we can deal with this item.
Certainly. Whereas the report titled Update on the Ottawa Light Rail Transit Public Inquiry and Recommended Next Steps was not originally listed on the agenda and was subsequently published with the revised agenda on Friday, October 28th, 2022. Therefore, be resolved that FEDCO approved this item be formally added to the agenda pursuant to subsection 89.3 of the procedure bylaw, being bylaw number 2021-24, to allow for the consideration at this meeting.
On the motion, carried, adopté.
Carried.
Mr. Kanellakis, I believe you have presentation.
Mr. Mayor, no, we don't have a presentation. We're just available for questions. Leslie Donnelly is here as the key contact for this report.
Okay, my apologies. Any questions on the Donnelly report, we'll call it? What can be said in 5 pages, Leslie says it in 500. Anything, Councillor Gower, please?
Yes, I just had a question. There was a breakdown in the report of city costs to respond to the inquiry, and I wasn't sure how staff time was being accounted for, or if it was included in that overall cost, because I know there's lots of hours and many departments, many levels of the city that have gone into this. Can staff provide some clarity on how that's being tracked and what the financial implications are there?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Some staffs costs are captured. Many are not. They're being absorbed in other parts of the organization. Where I borrowed staff that needed to be backfilled, those staff salary costs are accounted within the 4.5 million. The rest of them, such as my cost for me and the cost for most of the staff that I'm using, that's being absorbed within budgets. Where we do have overtime is where we require significant amounts of overtime from IT staff to pull the records and do the document production, and that is all captured.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councilman Hart, please.
Thanks very much, Mayor, and thank you for the report. I'm just wondering, can you just lay out for councillors the next steps on this? I guess we don't have an expected date of reporting yet, but maybe you do. And just what will occur after in summary?
Mr. Mayor, if committee and council adopt this report, well, I can say it would be highly unusual for the commission to give us a heads up as to when they're dropping the report. They're not terribly forthcoming on that level to the participants. We expect that it will be by November 30th, but as the report notices, is council will be in the middle of a transition. It's likely there won't be standing committees. So what this does is it really establishes a set of processes that will set the next council up to do several things. So the first thing will be to prepare a companion report that will go to the appropriate standing committee with the commissioner's final report and recommendations to allow for public delegations and then to go through council. And the recommendation is for as soon as practicable, because you want the new council to have the time and ability to set its own schedule and understand where it's going to the right committee and how that goes. The other thing is, as you know, governance is the first report that the new council will deal with. Information management, records management is a standard governance instrument. So if the recommendations are approved, an approach to reviewing the records management bylaw, to seek guidance from the IPC on temporary records using instant messaging app, that process will be identified in the governance report and the next council will deal with it. The same is true with dealing with some of the issues that we discovered going through this inquiry process with respect to setting out some internal improvements to internal project governance and accommodating, allowing, discussing the how council should be updated throughout the process. We have community stakeholder engagement, but we haven't laid that out in a formal way. So that will be going through part of the city treasurer's review of the business case approach, and we'll again come back to the new council. As for the LRT stuff, as you all know, this will be some 23rd or 24th of the hindsight reviews, third-party reviews. That is an active file. There is ongoing third-party monitoring, and the companion report that comes with the LRT recommendations will be both talking about the rear view and updating council on what's gone on since. So it is really very much a process report, given the awkwardness of where we're at in the term of council and the commissioner's report.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Just last question around the delegation of authority. So just to give me a timeline of that, we've given a lot of delegated authority over previously on this file. I suspect the new council may wish to take some of that back for reporting purposes and the public. What would be the process for taking back some of that delegated authority within the new term of council? Would that come through governance, or would that be another spot that would come as a result of the public inquiry that was required?
I'm sure someone else may have something to say, but the vision was we would wait for the companion report, wait for the inquiry's recommendations, review the best practices, bring forward a companion report where it would be accomplished through that process. That's how we had a preliminary discussions.
Okay, thank you very much for the.
Thank you very much. On the report as presented, adopted, carried. Councillor Dudas, you have a motion to go in camera.
I do, Mr. Mayor. Where is the item titled? Oh, sorry. Yeah, whereas the item titled Light Rail Transit Legal Update in Camera was not originally listed on the agenda and was published with the revised agenda on October 28th, 2022. Therefore, be resolved that FEDCO approve this item be formally added to the agenda. Is this the right one? Sorry. I've got several. Is this yeah, okay. Added to the agenda pursuant to subsection 89.3 of the procedure bylaw to allow for the consideration of this item at this meeting.
On that motion, carried. And then motion by Councillor Dudas to a motion to go in camera, please, Councillor Dudas.
Certainly. Be it resolved that the Finance and Economic Development Committee resolve in camera to receive and consider LRT legal update pursuant to the procedure bylaw, subsections 13.1e, litigation or potential litigation affecting the city, and 13.1f, the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, reporting out date not to be reported out.
Adopted, carried. We'll now take a 10-minute break to allow members to leave the Zoom meeting and join the MS Teams meeting, as well as to allow clerk staff to stop the Zoom meeting. So 11:15, we'll reconvene. And if anyone has any technical challenges, if they can contact our committee coordinator. So we'll be in recess for the next 10 minutes till 11:15. Thank you. Merci.
Okay, everyone. I understand we have quorum and we're good to start proceeding. So we'll commence now. And for the benefit of those joining us online, the FEDCO committee just met in camera in order to receive a presentation on light rail transit from the legal perspective. These matters will not be reported out as they relate to subsections 13(1)(e) of the procedure bylaw, litigation or potential litigation affecting the city, and 13(1)(f), the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. During the in-camera session, no votes were taken other than procedural motions and/or directions to staff. We will now move on to item 11, information previously distributed. And that is item 11.1, 2022-2026 Election Compliance Audit Committee appointment of members and update on compliance audit processes. Does anybody have any questions or wish to discuss that item? No. And item 11.2, economic development update, Q4 2021 and Q1 2022. Are both items received?
Received.
Excellent. Item number 13, notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meeting. I don't believe we've received any. No. Item 14, inquiries. We don't have any of those either. Okay. Item 15, we have no other business. And item 16, adjournment. We carry on adjournment. Carried. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. It looks lovely outside.
Thank you.